let's come back onto the statement from Synovus.
Yes, I think the critical part really, and the lesson to be taken from this is, whilst there are, of course, serious consequences for all the people that were affected specifically by this and the sort of the health implications, really what I want to do is to use this as an effective case study. And of course, the critical part really is that they describe themselves as having invested heavily in ensuring our IT arrangements are as safe as they possibly can be. Now, the lesson to learn from that is that they can never be safe. There does not seem to be a single mode of technology or any sort of digital platform which doesn't succumb ultimately to some sort of invasion like this. And therefore, this should be borne in mind, specifically with regard to consideration of identity and currency and the obsession, really, that the system has, the establishment has, with digitizing absolutely everything. This should be a very stark reminder of the frailty of these systems. Now, we'll look a little bit wider because fraud is such a big issue now, accounting for nearly half of all crime in the UK. So the BDO fraud report has come out for the last year, and we're just going to go through some of it. Before we do, I should just point out that the business of investigating and protecting against fraud is not a bad one to be in. The fee income of all BDO firms, including the members of their exclusive alliances, was $14 billion as of September 2023. However, that to one side, in their fraud report, and this specifically concentrates on the UK, they say that in 2023, 2.3 billion of fraud was far below the 2021 figure of 10 billion, largely due to the massive level of fraud linked to the government support schemes during the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, I just reinforce the message that when it comes to trusting the government to manage a digital system properly, we should not be presenting that trust to them. They do not deserve it. Anyway, the BDO report goes on specifically with cybercrime, and of course the sort of current thing being AI. And of course, this is where we discover quite what a double-edged sword it is, because they talk about AI picking up momentum and blurring the lines between what is real and what is fake. Whilst AI-enabled technology can provide revolutionary methods to conduct business, it does also, unfortunately, create a host of new opportunities for AI-powered scams. Now, I think that would have been fairly obvious to anybody who'd given it due consideration, but nonetheless, that is the sort of cyber part of it. The other part of sort of, let's say, more conventional fraud is now apparently being dealt with by government in slow time, but the result of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act of 2022 has brought about the offence of failure to prevent fraud. So we're just going to have a quick look at what that means. And essentially, it's to target businesses if they profit from fraud committed by their employees. Effectively, it's making sure that the organisation, even if it's unaware of it, has responsibility for the activities of employees. So under the new offence, an organisation will be liable where a specified fraud offence is committed by an employee or an agent for the organisation's benefit, and the organisation did not have reasonable fraud prevention procedures in place. It does not need to be demonstrated that company bosses ordered or knew about the fraud. Now, on the company bosses side of things, it is worth pointing out that company bosses will not be liable for any offences on this failure to prevent fraud, because they're deemed to be not, in effect, responsible if they didn't know. So that's something that in due course probably will require a degree more scrutiny. The other thing that's being very much scrutinised now is Companies House part in all of this, and they report just last week that they're making progress on implementing the reforms that are brought about by this legislation, in particular on the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act. Sorry, I misspoke, 2023 it is, not 22. Reforms of Companies House processes and new statutory functions and objectives for the registrars, reforms of laws that apply to limited partnerships, and new provisions relating to the register of overseas entities. So this should really be significant, but it remains to be seen how Companies House will actually deal with it. And indeed, House of Commons Library putting this out again from last week in terms of what can be done and how the register is corrected. Identity verification, a large part of it, and what exactly is or is not deemed to be correct. So the registrar carries out the checks, and she has limited powers to verify or validate the information which is delivered to her. I think it's a common misconception that Companies House has had a responsibility to date to be able to do that. But they go on to say, provided a document appears to be properly delivered, the registrar must register it. So that's the system by which Companies House operates at the moment. We'll just go on a little bit further to say that the registrar will now be given broader powers under the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, so she can become a more active gatekeeper over company registrations. This will include powers to check, challenge and refuse to register any information which is inaccurate or false, whilst also ensuring any fraudulent addresses can be removed more easily. So there's a lot to consider there, and whether or not this is actually going to have any effect at all, it's far too early to tell, but nonetheless, Companies House do appear to be doing something about it, and when there is publication of data to give any sort of feedback in terms of metrics of success, I will of course report on that.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.